Broadcast. Today is Friday, April 26th. Welcome to the Zaner MARKETCAST, your one and only spot to keep up with all of the agricultural market news. I'm Joe Nikruto. I'm here with
Dan Hussey.
Today, we are going to talk about just a few things. Rainfall in the center of the Corn Belt. We're going to talk about the new dairy cow testing mandate. If we get a spare minute, we're going to cover
a little bit more of what the next week's release of this SAF announcement from the SAF. USDA and EPA could be looming.
But before we start that, we saw something today that had to do with surge pricing in Manhattan. And the question was how long until that starts for Chicago and other large cities across the Midwest. And I just thought to myself that was maybe one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. I don't even know. I'm trying to figure out how that works. Dan, do you have any idea?
Also known, I guess, as congestion pricing.
Pricing, sure.
Right, no, but it has a surge factor to it, right? As congestion builds up in city centers, the idea is they will start charging a toll to drive your vehicle. So the idea being like you wanted to drive across Manhattan at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, middle of end of the day or during rush hour time frame, it's going to cost you to be able to do that or have the privilege just to drive around the city of New York starting in June.
You think that will work the same for our podcast if all three listeners happen to try and listen at the same time? Can we charge somebody extra? How much do we charge now, Carter?
Yeah, right.
It's a lot, right?
The price
it's
is
nothing.
Right at free.
It's $0. So we would just have to charge extra $0 for the third listener. Yeah. So we'll keep an eye. We'll watch that as price action develops.
Yeah. So this week, right, corn, wheat, and beans kind of ended on, well, what looked like a positive note here to end the week, I think. But daily wise, there was a little bit of a hiccup there.
Tried to crack them around midday. Yep. Some came back, some did not. On the week, we had corn, weekly price action for corn. We opened the week 441.5. Dan, the high was 454.25, 439.75. Last trade I saw was 450.25. I think that's a weekly change of about 7.25. From the estimates this morning, I thought I saw where they said in corn funds still short 266,000 contracts. We'll see what today's Commitment of Traders has to say. But up 7.5, not a bad week for corn.
And that estimate coming from ADMIS is
ADMIS, yep.
Our daily
the morning analyst, or whoever. They do a pretty good job of tracking fund data on a day-to-day basis. Certainly difficult thing to do these days now that it's not happening in the pit.
Absolutely. And for those that don't know, right, that number will be is not set in stone. We'll get the CFTC's report, but unfortunately, that is read every Tuesday. So that is even behind the potential estimates that we're talking about there.
That. Whether it's 230, 260, 280, this is still a pretty big.
The idea is that it's sizable and it's within about 10% of all time, high, right? Or the largest commercial or non-commercial short that we've seen.
Exactly. Beans weekly, we opened at 1162.5. The high there was 1191.75. Low 1159.75. Last trade I saw was 1177. That's a weekly change, up 11.25.
It does not feel like we are up this week on beans.
It's 11.25 too. I almost want to go back and check that number.
Right? Yeah. It doesn't feel that way, but
funds are still short there, 158,000 contracts, and they don't seem, much like corn, they don't seem to be in a hurry to cover. We'll see what the commitment of Traders says today, but 158,000 contracts. Now, we may be talking about the chart of the week. I have to adjust the hat here for wheat. We opened the week at 565.75. High was 533.25. I'm sorry, high was 633.25.
We got above the 6 handle.
633.25 and 628, I think, was the 200-day in July. There's, if I remember correctly, 565.5 low. Last trade below the 628, but 622.5. Not bad for wheat. That's a weekly change of up.
Wait for it.
55.75. Rally cap in full effect.
Holy cow.
However, funds coming into the day, the estimates from ADMIS, 76,000 contracts still short. Now,
and that's down considerably off of the most recent levels. Is that correct?
I don't remember. It was higher than that.
I feel like we were over 100 at one point.
It might have been over 100,
and now
yeah.
we're starting to diminish. And I would imagine, even as of last Tuesday, right, wheat had to have been at least 20 or 30 cents at that point off the lows, right? And as of Tuesday's reading, I would imagine that, right, this week we're going to see a sizable change in that week over week.
And so funds are doing what they can, right?
Yeah.
But this market is moving rather fast, and they do not seem. That's 76,000. If it's still that number, that's
it's still a lot to cover.
Still a lot to cover.
Still a lot to cover
if they intend to cover.
Absolutely,
and if very difficult to predict their movements in price action such as this. And so we would be remiss if we were implying that they're going to have to cover that whole 76,000. But up at these levels, especially if they get over that 200, I mean, that's
there really aren't many other reasons for a technical trader to be short at that point.
Technical strength combined with a large short position is not usually the recipe for.
And not that that's a sign that you need to go out and buy wheat right now,
For
right?
sure.
But the sentiment has clearly started to flip there on the short term, and that's not something to ignore.
Absolutely, absolutely. That brings us to our first news story of the week. Big story. Some folks saying here's a big deal. Some folks saying not a big deal. But Ag Weather Forum. This is from Bryce Anderson at DTN. Upcoming central U.S. rainfall over the next 10 days is getting attention for potentially interrupting corn and bean planting. This period of wetter conditions also offers a significant benefit for soil moisture improvement, which we thought we might see. This is not the story, but this is just me talking. We thought we might see that with this week's drought map, and we didn't quite see.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask you about the conversation you and having. We were looking at, some of those places have shown some improvement, right? But you still look at it, and it's a big blotch of yellow and orange everywhere. The red might have gone away a little bit, but let's face it, that's a drought map that shows a lot of drought still.
23%, I thought I read, of U.S. corn growing area in some type of drought, down from last year's 27%, but still the same
number
as the
I remember us looking at earlier.
Week. Yeah. So back to the story, especially true in the Western Corn Belt, where precip deficits were large. Precipitation deficits in much of the Western Corn Belt, including almost all of Iowa, are 20 or more inches below normal over the past 3 years.
That's a huge deficit.
That's a big deficit. USDA Midwest Climate Hub Director Dennis Today says, and this is Dennis speaking, the shorter-term deficits back to 6 months are not too bad, and the profile, subsoil moisture profile, I'm sure he's talking about, at least the upper part, is mostly in good shape east and most everywhere nearer the surface, Today says. Deeper profile expect is still drier in parts of Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri, and definitely groundwater is showing the effects of that 1 to 3 plus year deficit. So that's some rather frank discussion from the USDA regarding subsoil moisture, I would say.
Absolutely. And it brings up a big question, right, of how much of that subsoil moisture content retained year over year have we been relying on to make a crop these last few years in drought conditions, and how much of that, remains to be a asset that could be tapped into in a deficit this year, right? If you don't get rain last year, I think we got rain at very timely points in the growing season, but truthfully, there was, my humble opinion, seemed like enough moisture content beneath the surface of the soil to carry through, particularly the corn crop, across almost the entire country.
It seemed that way. Certainly
it's getting to be the point where we joke about how you can grow corn in the desert, it seems like, and that's where this joke is kind of stemming from, I think.
And so wondering how we'll see or why we might get some sort of bullish interpretation. You're going to be wet here for a handful of days. You got 2 or 3 weather events on tap for the central Corn Belt. And then after that, most forecasts suggest that maybe it's going to get drier.
Yeah. And before we move on to our next story, how the conversations this last week or two with our growers, how many guys are itching to get in the field? I mean, personally, I'll answer that now for myself. Just about everybody's talking about wanting to do it if they haven't already. I know I was on the phone with some Iowa clients today talking specifically about really itching to get out and get going. They haven't started, but they are, the first chance that they can roll that planter out and make some headway, he is going to be going full steam here. That says a lot about where we are right now this time of year.
A lot of folks in Iowa, I think, were racing, getting things in anticipation of this weather event now. And so while they may be on the sidelines today, probably in the 2 or 3 days previous, going, guns a-blazing.
And that comment was from Western Iowa, where they're not in drought condition, got a bit of a half inch of rain, and is, honestly, at this point, right, he's hoping he doesn't get any in the next few days to to be able to just pump it out, get it
some
done,
stuff
and then let's
Certainly.
then let's soak the world.
Certainly.
All right. So next up, we got the USDA issuing dairy cow testing mandates. That's another story out of DTN and has been hitting the news wires across the thing. Boy, I think we need to take a step back and reaffirm everybody on the broadcast that, hey, while we are professionally skeptical of any kind of breaking news before it becomes market moving, the fact that this story has developed beyond just a couple cows getting sick and now we're seeing mandates being imposed, now you got to start paying attention a little bit more.
And we mentioned we were going to fight the urge to make the joke about maybe they were going to make some cows wear masks because we maybe have heard that song before. When you talk about testing mandates, but as we work through this story, or as we add a little bit of discussion, you can see that with what's happening with Colombia, right? Small participant.
That's right.
They don't take a tremendous amount, 0.012 or something like that %.
And we're talking about Colombia, the country, and the recent imposition on U.S. beef and cattle exports. Colombia has decided that they are no longer taking U.S. products until this H5N1 or the HPAI has moved on. And the USDA is now requiring that testing for any dairy cow moving across state lines.
I'm not going to Kanye you. I'm going to let you.
By all means, USDA will also mandate that laboratories and state veterinarians report all positive influenza A tests on livestock to the USDA's animal and plant health inspection services. This is a big change. Because we haven't seen mandates like this since, I want to say, like mad cow, or the last time we saw some avian bird flu. Of course, coming into the dairy and beef and cattle industry is a big difference. We've seen these things in the culling of chicken production across the country. We haven't gotten to that point, but of course, mandating testing and making sure that it's not moving across state lines. There's obviously action being taken now, and not just the hope that this kind of goes away. The FDA is now doing much broader testing of dairy products because it has shown up in pasteurized milk and inside chicken eggs. But the pasteurization process does seem to kill any viral remnants, as the heat used is much higher than it takes to kill the virus. So the CDC still remains that there's a low risk for human transmission, and human health concerns are not seeing any increases in foodborne illness at this time. So
not to mention the fact that the guy that did get it, the one proven case, he got pink eye.
The dairy worker, right?
The dairy worker got pink eye.
Got pink eye. And as far as we've heard, he's gotten better and is probably back to work. I can't confirm that, but it's been long enough now that I didn't hear anyone dying of this yet, right?
Well, and so I was laughing earlier. We have to say, mea culpa, because 2 weeks ago you and I sat here and said, oh, this is, you look at milk, no reaction in the milk market.
Great
this is
reason.
not going to be a big thing. Everybody's overreacting, and here we are 2 weeks removed, and now we've got mandatory testing from the USDA.
And the chart of milk had moved quite a bit off of the low.
It had moved, yeah. As soon as we said, almost to the minute when we said that it wasn't gonna.
Or hadn't to that point. To be fair, we weren't making any speculation on what might happen, but milk was not responding up to that point. And thus, until money gets being put where the mouth is, it's hard to give anything credence, right?
And so for our purposes, or in my opinion, even though we all know what's happening, right? You see what's happening here. This is at this point, this is not, let me rephrase this. We have to ask, what is this?
Yeah.
But
that's our job.
The implications,
right? That's what we do.
The implications are getting kind of serious, right? So the Colombians, first domino, who knows, so if you have Japan or South Korea or somebody,
absolutely,
if there's something
Colombia
else here,
in and of itself is not the reason to be concerned. It's our actual export partners that take a lion's share of our export product. They start to turn a blind eye to our production. That becomes a problem. Much like the trade war with China a few years back. Boy, if they don't buy our beans, where do they go?
and so, certainly we can have sport, but the implications can be rather serious. Even if the disease itself, even if the situation itself is not very serious, the implications for futures markets and for risk management could be very serious. So certainly we are paying very careful attention to this. Folks should pay very careful attention to this from day to day, I would suggest.
Because it doesn't matter what our opinions are, the market is always right.
Seems that way. Yeah.
Next up here, and the big news for next week, which we don't have anything breaking in terms of life-changing or altering information here, but a brief discussion on SAF, what the potential for next week's release could be.
Tuesday, I think.
And our understanding of the information that's going to be coming out. I certainly know from our discussions with people who are more familiar with the matter than we are, we've kind of already heard that this was coming in some capacity. We knew from the lobbyists and people within the National Corn Growers Association and within the National Soybean Growers Association that we've spoken to that, hey, the next steps for this thing, for SAF to become a reality, of course, laying down exactly where pipelines to bring that carbon that needs to be sequestering will be. A lot of that can be figured out pretty easily, believe it or not. The place that it was getting hung up, to our knowledge, was in exactly this. What climate model is going to be utilized in order to generate the carbon credits and tax credits from an economic standpoint that end up being the payments through the system to justify this entire process, right? It can't happen if people aren't doing it profitably. We learned that with ethanol a long time ago. And ethanol, and ethanol profit margins, ever going negative and not being profitable works against the economy of ethanol becoming a thing. It's not going to make sense if it doesn't make literal sense for people, right? And so proving the economics of SAF to the world is incredibly important to get this right because of how big it could be. So next week's report or release from the EPA and the USDA, whoever's actually putting it out there, will show us the model they intend to go forward with, that then us as analysts and economists can sit back and then start to piecemeal through how the economy of SAF will affect things like the price of soybeans, the price of land, and anything that this could potentially touch, which could be huge because, as we know, the demand for aviation fuel is in the trillions. I mean, this is a massive industry that could be bigger than ethanol. Let's put it that way. If ethanol was big for corn, SAF is so much bigger on so many levels that it is something to be excited for. However, I do want to keep people's expectations somewhat realistic here, is that the news next week to me is not going to be the end all be all for this. And it's going to be a launching point for the next discussion in SAF and how we get to the finish line, right? So we're not there yet. and my understanding is that there's still a lot to be figured out. And I still have hesitancies in a election year, right, where politicians can actually hammer out the finer details. However, this will point us in the direction that they're deciding to take it, because it's up that we're north. There's about 4 different economic models that have been talked about in academia, and some even put to practice and tested in Europe. That behind this, we're going to figure out which one we're going with, and should be technically applied going forward.
News headlines that I saw that there's maybe some concern that this model will be more restrictive and not as favorable for corn growers. And there is some concern. And so a lot of eyeballs on, and I believe it is Tuesday when they're going to release. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. And what Joe's alluding to is the idea that both ethanol and corn and soy products, as well as a large number of other agricultural products, like I forget what they're called, but there's animal fat, and it's a whole name for this other subset of oils, right? Of agriculturally, derived oils that can be used to develop this sustainable aviation fuel. So, there's a lot of opportunity there for the entire agricultural industry, and finding out exactly who gets what piece of the pie here is part of what we'll be able to find out next week.
I get it. Okay. Yeah. Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Did we miss anything?
No. You wanted to call, attention, everybody, interested in getting questions on air here, finding out more from us.
For sure.
Check out a link here, provided to fill out that questionnaire. So during our question and answer section here, we can address exactly what your concerns or needs are for the week. I think we got a special question though from Carter, our producer.
If you could visit any place in the world right now, where would you go and why? There's a really great pizza place across the street And they have a special on Friday on, I think if you go later in the day, you can get like a pepperoni slice, or, maybe they'll do like a spinach. I'm starving. I don't know about you guys.
I don't think Joe's had lunch, guys.
I don't know about you guys, but I didn't eat any lunch yet. And so, for me, the place where I would probably go first is that joint across the street. But that's probably not the spirit of this question. Can you think of anywhere in the world? Goodness gracious. Osage, Iowa.
Anywhere in the world. I'm going to go with, honestly,
Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
I'm going to go with someplace I'm never going to be able to go. North Korea.
Oh,
I mean, right? Didn't
the last guy that looked like you that went to North Korea get a little?
Well, I'm assuming this is without any negative,
I see.
any negative repercussions, right? If I can just see North Korea without becoming a political prisoner, I think that'd be pretty cool. I'd love to see a place that seems unobtainable, to get to.
Yeah, I think I'm. I always say half on one side Irish and on the other side Polish and Russian, and so if I could just do 2 quick stops, if I can go to some place where we could maybe visit some folks in Ireland, or maybe a border somewhere where I could hit a bar that's real close to both spots, that would be great.
Poland and Ireland? Who's going to tell them about that border?
The border between Poland and Ireland, the border between Poland and Russia, but might be a little hot there. I don't want anybody dropping a missile on my head while I'm trying to get a Polish beer, but it would probably be something like that. Or Turks and Caicos.
Ooh.
Just sit on the beach.
Just don't bring any bullets in your ammo. Too soon?
Too soon, probably for that guy.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you for listening to the Zaner MarketCast today. If you need more because you just can't get enough of us, you can follow us on Facebook at Zaner Ag Hedge or on Twitter and LinkedIn at the Zaner Group. If you have not heard about it already, check out the Daily Ag Hedge hotline where you can call in every day and get the agricultural updates on the world that you need from our one and only Ted Seifried, who you may have seen on RFTV and Market to Market. The best part is it's completely free. You can find the sign-up links here that we provided. Thank you again. Drop us a like, comment, or follow to not miss a beat, and we'll be back with you as price action develops.